he might have the only original power worms in crystal clear Pepsi color left on the planet.
Yeah, my dad always accuses me of giving a lure that I know isn't going to work.
How many times a season do you hear a client say we're going to need a bigger boat?
Every day.
What kind of weird British solution is Eric envisioning here? Are we going to appoint an otter lord?
Good morning, degenerate anglers, and welcome to Bent, the fishing podcast that wants to punch the face of the guy that bails on a fishing trip and says, guess I made the right call when he finds out that the fishing sucked. I'm Joe Cermelli, and I'm joined today by a dear friend I know feels the same way. My amigo Jimmy Fee of On the Water magazine is guest hosting today. What's up, Jimmy?
What's up, Joe? That is, I feel like, one of the cardinal rules of being a good fishing buddy is not doing that exact thing.
We have had that conversation. So he's that guy's like, guess I made the right. Well, I went and you didn't. You did not make the right call. Anyway, so it's funny because I told listeners they'd be hearing from many frequent Bent guests, but with you, I've pretty much lied because you've never been on this show before. So you're a fresh voice, which means nobody knows anything about you. So if you had to, I don't know, describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be?
So right now, 3 words for me and my fishing would definitely be need some sleep.
Oh, you doing the thing where you're out all night with the fish and the striped bass?
I've been doing, and some weirder stuff. I got into some nighttime crabbing last night.
Nighttime? Who does? You'll lose sleep to go nighttime crabbing to catch crabs?
Because that's when the crabs are active. That's when my kids are asleep. Is really what that comes down to. You know what that's like.
I do. Okay, fair enough. But look, all right. So I'm making fun of you for nighttime crabbing, but I'm not nighttime crabbing, and I'm going to make Jim here feel slightly uncomfortable for a sec because he's a humble man, but he is one of the most devoted surfcasters I know. I would say elite. Elite is the word I would use. Dude, you've caught more huge stripers in the surf than anyone else I know personally. And I mean, barring Bob the garbage man. But unlike your average Insta hero, you stay very hush-hush about your surf fishing in particular.
I mean, part of that's because I don't get any good pictures of my fish in the surf. I might post a little bit more.
It's a very hard environment. I'll give you that. But man, I've always respected that about you so much. And we're also good buddies because we've worked in the same industry for a long time. You're a multi-species, multimedia angler. I guess that's what we are, like myself. You work full-time for a media company, writing, editing, shooting, and hosting videos. So, when venting needs to happen about our jobs, about the behind-the-scenes stuff that the viewers and readers don't see, I can just text you and you understand. You know what I mean? It's like brain surgeons. I can just text, upper motor neurons. Am I right? And you're just like, totes, you know?
Oh, totes.
Well played. So one of the other reasons I wanted to have you on is because I wanted to talk about, loose theme here, FOMO, fear of missing out. And I think it's fair to say that regardless of the fishery, every angler experiences FOMO. But you and I have a very specific kind of FOMO, which is tuna FOMO.
Oh, and it's not for tuna. The fishing's been so good for the past few seasons. It's not a fear of missing out. It's a fact of missing out. I'm not worried I'm going to miss out. I know I'm missing out.
Dude, I'm right there with you. I mean, and part of the problem, right, is for all the different kinds of fishing we do, it's the one thing where we're reliant on other people. You and I don't have the means to just well, I'm going to go tuna fishing Saturday. It's just one of those things we need somebody else to take us. That's kind of part of the problem.
You do. You either have a close friend with a boat or you have a boat yourself, and that's your ticket to the tuna grounds. And if you don't have that, you're always a couple degrees away of having that reliable tuna invite when you know the bite's good, which leaves you, Joe, you book a trip. You have to book something months in advance.
I'm getting to that, right? But now, see, you live up on Cape Cod, so you're surrounded by salt water. And like I said, I've never owned a boat big and capable enough to get me to these fish. But I feel 5-6 years ago, I don't know about you, but I had rides out the wazoo. I was turning down this tuna guy to go with that tuna guy. And for a multitude of reasons, that's just changed, right? Boats get sold, people's kids grow up and eat up more time and so on. And I'm not bitter about it, but like you said, it's just facts now. I've just sort of learned to live with it. So I just try and book a charter with a guide at least once a season, and without fail, that day will be canceled by weather or engine trouble or whatever. I have always had better luck on impromptu tuna trips than planned ones, but those are rare anymore. And like you said, you also can't invite yourself. It's kind of like code. You have to be invited.
There's a lot that goes into tuna fishing, not only fueling the boat, which is very expensive because you're running further than you would for your typical inshore trip. The gear itself is very expensive. It's tough to be like, hey, I'll bring some PB&Js. Can I get on the boat this weekend?
I got some dill pickle Pringles if I can get in on that. Yeah, exactly. It's like the crews are very tight. It tends to be the same guys that run with each other over and over again, and either you're in or you're not. But now the big problem that you and I have is we both closely follow some badass tuna charter guides. And every season, I'm like, I'm going to unfollow these people. And it's not because they're not good dudes, but I just can't take the FOMO. Like it gets to a point where I can't stand looking. And here's a hot tip for everybody, right? Following charter guides is pretty much a trap. Like if you suffer from any sort of fishing FOMO, you don't follow local guides because it's very easy to forget that it's their job to be out there every day. You know what I mean?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, in general, it's not the captains who are out there catching the fish every day.
Right.
They're the ones, they're putting the clients on the fish, and that comes with its own set of headaches. I've been on boats with captains who are so, let's call it intense, that they really want you to get into the fish, that it's borderline, they are yelling. They're yelling, and you have to be able to take some yelling.
I've been yelled at many times, but the point is that, like, that guy's getting the love because he's the captain, but the dude who actually got to reel in that fish that you didn't, for all you know, that was his one a year. Like that was the trip he booked 5 months ago, and he got lucky and got the weather. But regardless, at the time of this recording, I've not gotten out for tuna once this season. But you know, you and I are eyeballing a lot of the same captains because On the Water, your magazine, covers New England and New Jersey. And I won't hear from you for like a month. And then randomly on a Tuesday at 2 p.m., I'll get this text from Jim that's just, tell me you're getting on this tuna bite, right? You do that, and I sigh and grovel, and I tell you why I'm not. And then I won't hear from you again for another month. Well, this year's bite was so good midsummer down here, the text was just right to the point, when are you going tuna fishing? And my response was, F you, that's when. Like, I was so angered by that point in the summer that I hadn't gotten my piece of the action.
I felt bad. It felt like I was rubbing it in at that point, which I wasn't. I just assumed you'd been out there. There were guys in kayaks catching them off New Jersey.
No, there weren't. That's not true.
That is 100%
like
true.
Two guys.
Yeah,
like
it wasn't
people.
A thing, but it happened. Guys went out there looking for fluke and caught some bluefin tuna.
Well, good for them in the kayak they rode in on. And you can't complain anyway because you got yours, man, very recently. Like, tell us about the giant itch scratcher you just caught.
Yeah, so I was out with my friend Captain Rob Taylor, and he runs Newport Sport Fishing Guide Service, and he also does commercial fishing for giant bluefin tuna. So he happened to have a day where he didn't have a charter. He was going out to try to catch a bluefin tuna to sell, was kind enough to invite me out with him, and man, we waited all day in the rain in Cape Cod Bay until we finally got our bite at 5:30. And it was a pretty quick battle, 45 minutes, pretty quick for...
That's short for a tuna that size, yeah.
Yeah, it was a 95-incher, weighed 510 pounds when we brought it. You know, you call up the truck, they come, they lift it out of the boat, and then that fish ideally goes to auction and will probably fly to Japan. It's probably on its way there now.
So you didn't get to taste any of that, obviously, because Rob sold it. But that's a different caliber of tuna fishing. That's not the fun run and gun, jig and pop stuff. Like, what's that really like? I've never done that. I've never caught a 500-pound fish. Like, you reeled. You did it. So
much of that. I am just the guy who just cranked the handle on the reel. I was the one not losing the fish. That's your lone job as the angler. Rob does the...
It's an important job.
It's an important job. But it's the captain that he set the drag. He did all the rigging for it. He's got the boat in the right place, caught the bait. And then he's positioning the boat around the fish while you're fighting it. But everything is in place so that it minimizes the margin for error. The rod remains in the rod holder. There's a swiveling rod holder with the big 130 size Shimano Tiagra reel, which is like the big bucket reel you see in Jaws, just much bolder and much nicer. And then a really long but really strong rod and all that does, it stays right in the rod holder. You're not really holding the rod and feeling the power of that fish. You were just trying to gain line when that fish is stopped and turns its head in your direction.
But that's all the time you don't see on Wicked Tuna. So what I'm asking you is, like, how painful is it? They don't really talk about that. Like, is it torture to reel like that?
Yeah, you start to burn out pretty quickly, especially, I'm not in the best shape. And like your shoulder, your arm starts to burn. And you see on Wicked Tuna a lot of, let's call it yank and crank, where those guys are grabbing the line, pulling it down to get their their crank on the reel. Each captain fishes a different way. Rob fishes a tighter drag than most captains, so he just has the guys cranking the reel. That eliminates another margin for error, where my first giant I ever hooked, that was a couple years ago, I was out with another captain and doing that yank and crank style, and the fish went to run, and I had a grip on the line and popped the leader right off. So didn't let go in time.
Well, good for you. I'm happy for you that you got your big tuna. I'm also hoping to get Rob on this show at some point because you tell me he's quite a character, right? And you know who else is a character? My buddy Conway Bowman out in California. And this is the guy that has pioneered fly fishing for mako sharks, among many other things. And I have FOMO about this too because I've never done it. But it's just not quite the same, right? Because it's not in my backyard. I can't be too upset about something happening on the opposite coast. But if you're a sweetwater angler, you might get upset about one of the answers Conway gives in this week's Covering Water.
I'm going in. Cover me, Porkins.
I can hold it.
Pull on!
No, I'm all right.
Joining me today for Covering Water, my old buddy, my old pal, Conway Bowman from San Diego, pioneer of fly fishing for mako sharks. What's going on, man? How's life out there in SoCal?
Well, it's life in SoCal. Lots of crazy stuff going on. We just had they tried to recall the governor, and he weathered that storm, which is amazing. Anyway, so we're back to square one. But other than that, it's fine. I mean, it's California, but it's Southern California. So
right, it's different.
But, it's different, but it's good. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we have to tell everybody what happened. So this is actually take 2 on Covering Water with Conway Bowman, because the last time we did this, all I heard in my headphones was the creepiest, eeriest horror movie gong. It's like a droning. I think we were channeling the other side. And what was creepier is you couldn't hear this on your end, right?
I know. It's weird. It was really weird.
It was literally some poltergeist shit. And I recorded a piece so that you guys can hear this. Now, Conway couldn't hear it. This is all I could hear.
Yeah, I don't hear that. Let's see. Squadcast. Yeah, there's nothing else open. Hold on.
So I'm wondering, dude, have you did you do the sage or hire the little poltergeist lady? Have you corrected this problem? Have you gotten the demons out of the Bowman residence?
Yeah, I don't know. I do think this house is haunted, though. There's some really weird stuff that has happened since we moved in here about 6 years ago. Just weird stuff. So it might be haunted. I don't know, but who knows?
If somebody listening, somebody techie knows what that was, they'll be like, oh yeah, it was just this. Let me know. Because even our audio guy, Phil, was like, I don't know, man. I've never heard anything like that before.
It was weird.
Yeah. But anyway, man. So beyond fly fishing for makos, that whole deal. I mean, you've been the host of several TV shows, Ford Outfitters, Fly Fishing the World, 50 Places to Fly a Fish Before You Die. You've written books. You've traveled all over the world to chase fish. And what I also think I know about you is you grew up in the surf skate scene out there a little bit, right? There's a little bit of punk rock in you. And I think I once saw a picture, which I'd love to have, by the way, to post on Instagram to promo this. It's a very young you with like big frosted wavy hair, like super 80s like thrash hair.
Yep, that's when I had hair. I had quite the coif. Yeah.
Right on. So anyway, dude, here's how Covering Water works. So this segment is designed to just look sort of beyond the fishing skills and really get a deeper behind the scenes look at who our guests really are. So I'm going to put 2 minutes on the clock, and I'm just going to rapid fire 20 questions at you. We'll get through as many as we can. But the whole idea, right? You don't have much time to think. You just have to answer. And at the end, I will give you 1 full minute to elaborate or backpedal on whichever answer you think was most damning.
Okay.
Sound good?
Sounds great.
All right, here we go. 2 minutes on the clock with Conway Bowman. Of all the fish you've targeted, what was the most difficult to catch on fly?
Ty Mashir.
In Point Break, who were you rooting for, Bodie or Johnny Utah?
Johnny Utah.
Really? All right. The worst place you ever had a hook stuck in you was?
My back.
Ooh, that's okay. How many times a season do you hear a client say we're going to need a bigger boat?
Every day.
Okay. The most underrated fish in U.S. waters is?
The carp.
Beautiful. Social distortion or black flag?
Black flag.
Oh, love it. The oldest piece of tackle you own and still use is?
Fluger Medalist 1410. Flywheel.
Classic. Your favorite line from Fast Times at Ridgemont High is?
Mr. Hand. What was it? Oh God,
Hola, Mr. Hand.
no, it's the pizza thing, man. Oh God,
I got it.
There's so many. Oh my God,
I got you, man. Okay,
we're on my time, our time, whatever that thing
our
was.
time. Right on. Which part of the Mako on the fly process do people screw up most often?
The cast.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
If you could choose one celebrity to fish with for a day, who would it be?
Keith Richards.
Nice. We share a birthday, by the way. So you've targeted tons of species. Tell me, which one is still on your bucket list?
The Mangar.
What is a Mangar?
Mangar. Wait.
We'll elaborate later because
right.
I'm the clock's running out. The last concert you attended was?
Oh my God. English Beat.
Okay. All right. And last one. What's the most overrated fish in U.S. waters?
The largemouth bass.
Beautiful. Could not agree more. That's time. That was great. So there's several ones I think could use some elaboration, but I'm curious to hear which one. Well, you only get to pick one. Which one do you want to tell us more about?
It's the Johnny Utah or Bodie.
Yes.
And I mixed them up. Bodie all the way. I'm sorry. Yeah, it was Bodie.
Oh,
yeah,
good.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I commend you for using it. You just said that largemouths suck, but you're going to use your time here on Bent to tell us why Bodie is cooler, and that's why I love you. So go ahead.
Well, he just is. I mean, he was more tan. He looked more like a surfer, although Patrick Swayze was a horrible paddler, by the way. He was a big kid. But he was just more badass. I mean, he skydived, he robbed a bank, and he was the Bodhisattva, brah. Yeah. I mean, he was Bodhi. He controlled his environment. Whether it was controlling War Child or or controlling the police officer.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the movie, that was it. He did it his way because he was the Bodhisattva, brah.
Hands down, no bullshit. That is the best elaboration on covering water we've ever had in a year and a half. That was the best. Appreciate it so much, dude. So people know you are still actively guiding. Like they probably have to book in advance, but you are still doing the Mako thing on a weekly basis in season, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's getting, this year was probably my busiest year in a long time. And fishing's great. The fish are big. They're getting bigger. It's the weirdest thing. Over the last 10 years, I've seen an increase in the size. It's crazy. But if people want to book with me, they got to get ahead of it because, I've got other stuff going on too.
Sure.
But I would say 6 months to book with me.
Wow.
It's crazy because there's been kind of this resurgence of I don't know if it's, anglers wanting to target a big game fish on the fly rod, but I think they're discovering that they really don't have to fly. Well, number one, COVID pretty much shut everybody down for traveling. Right. So they said, well, let's do the next best thing, or let's do a really good big game fish, and let's go to San Diego because it's close. And that really sort of kind of carved out a whole new clientele for me. So, and this year has been insane. It's been absolutely nuts.
Right on. Well, dude, I've known you for years. I've been saying I'm going to do this for years. I remember the first time I read about it was in Field and Stream, long before I ever worked there, and I have not gotten there yet. So hopefully the next time I see you, it'll be on your boat. But in the meantime, man, I appreciate you coming out for covering water. Best elaboration ever, Bodie for the win.
I love it.
Have you ever heard of a mangar, Jim?
I haven't. It sounds like man, bear, pig from South Park.
That's exactly what came to mind was man, bear, pig. I looked it up, and it's native to the Tigris and Euphrates river system in Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. And it looks like a mashir or like a she-fish kind of big silvery thing. And dude, I'd never heard of it before. Perhaps I should do a fin clips about those. But there's a very short mangar Wikipedia page. Like there's not a whole lot there, though it does say that they eat birds. And if they'll eat that, I'm certain they couldn't resist a spin walker from our sponsors, 13 Fishing. Is it a walking bait? Is it a prop bait? It's both, Jim, with the blade uniquely positioned at the belly to create, as 13 puts it, a beguiling sputter.
How beguiling, Joe?
It is. I also read that the Mangar is in trouble, probably because the party boat fleet in Iran is just hammering them constantly. But let's talk about party boats for a sec. You're a big fan of party boat fishing, and so am I. And on the water, you guys recently launched a new video series called At the Rail, which I'm super jealous of because finally somebody has gone all in on a media property that just glorifies party boat fishing.
Yeah, there's such a rich culture to party boat fishing that dates back to before World War I. And it's still such a vibrant part of the Northeast fishing culture. But you don't see much of it. You don't hear about it much in videos and YouTube videos and magazines as much.
And it's all over the country, right? Like, it's a big deal here. But, I mean, there's party boats on every coast, including the Gulf. And this is the first time I've seen somebody just focus in on that.
Yeah, I've been party boat fishing since my first ever saltwater trip. That was the first time I ever got out there on the, I went deep sea fishing on a half-day boat out of Sea Isle City, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And never owning a boat to this point, it's always my way to get out there and do the fishing I wouldn't be able to do on my own. And there's a boat in the Northeast for just about any type of fishing you want to do, from back bay fishing for flounder or fluke to going out to the canyons and catching tuna.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, you guys did a great job with it. Our mutual friend and your colleague, Anthony DeCicci, there's one line in your porgy episode, I believe it was, no, haddock episode, when you said his Lucky Charm is actually Lucky Charms. It's a Lucky Charms cereal bar, and you were like, that is the laziest Lucky Charm I have ever seen in my life.
Of all the things, it's like he's like, I need a superstition, and that makes sense. I need a Lucky Charm.
Well, there you go. Well, party boats, though, they can easily fix FOMO, right? Like if you can't find a ride, there's always that option. However, like the risk, and I think the fun of party boat fishing, of course, is that you don't know who you're fishing with. And I know over the years, you and I have both met some characters. And party boat people, they tend to be good salt of the earth people. You seem like you have a thought on that.
I've very rarely had an experience where I'm fishing next to or fishing near somebody who I would rather not be fishing near. Everybody's going out there with the same goal: have a good time, catch some fish. It is you don't run into too many jerks on the party boats.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, man. Like, they're always just really good down-home people, kind of like the people Bruce Springsteen sings about. You a Springsteen fan, Jim?
Oh, of course, Joe. You couldn't grow up around New Jersey without being a Springsteen fan.
Well, that's true. But people think like Born in the USA came in the mail with samples of Tide. That's not true. But yes, there's Jersey pride there. And wouldn't you know it, someone sent me audio of Bruce at a recent Jersey show. And while he normally rambles about politics and shit at the beginning of his songs, he apparently decided to give a regional party boat report.
Oh, wow.
Hey now, wondering if you'll take a little trip with me? That's right. To a little place called Asbury Park, New Jersey. You know, the big Mohawk was fishing about 3 miles off beautiful Asbury Park yesterday, and they had ho, hoo, hee, ho, keeper fluke. You know, the other day I was talking to my old friend Tony. That Tony. Tony from Point Pleasant, New Jersey. When Tony's not working at the asbestos factory, he likes to do a little fishing. I mean, heck, who doesn't, right? Tony said he was out on the Gambler last week and he caught ho, hey, ha, ho, keeper black sea bass. Doesn't that sound tasty? Doesn't it? You know what goes good with black sea bass? Tequila. Yeah. Well, you know, according to my buddy Lester, there's no hard alcohol allowed on the Sea Queen up here in Brooklyn. I know. I feel you. But old Lester said, you know what? I didn't need any liquor because I was feeling plenty high after catching ho, hoo, hee, ho, keeper porgies. This one goes out to Lester. and all the boys at the lead taste testing facility in Yonkers. Always remember to tip your mate. Ho, hoo, hee, how!
I fished on most of those boats the boss is talking about.
Did you ever bump into him out there, Jim? Was he ever on board?
Who knew? Maybe this season.
Well, I know it sounds. He did a perfect job of describing like the occupations of several of the people you'll meet on a party boat. I particularly enjoyed the lead taste testing facility guy. Anyway, let's move on from trying to win the pool with the biggest fish on the party boat to me trying to win the pool in fish news by catching a bigger, better news story than my co-anchor, Hayden Samick.
Fish news!
That escalated quickly.
So I'm going to do a quick bit of housekeeping here. I actually have a direct message from Mr. Miles Nolte to all of you listening. And this is so perfect. Hayden's already laughing. This is so perfect because in his farewell episode, the great Lance V, pointed out how badly Miles sucks at social media. So, like, if I may, right? Most people know that you don't use your work email to, like, sign up for Pornhub Premium or OnlyFans or Cat Toys Monthly or whatever, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You know, I didn't really think about it too much. I should probably call some places, but yeah, I got you.
Call the places you use your work email for too, in case you cut and run. Yeah. So anyway, listen. So Miles used his freaking meat eater email to sign up for Instagram.
Oh no.
And now he doesn't work here anymore, and that email went away. This literally happened 2 days before our farewell show. So now he cannot get into his Instagram account to respond to all your lovely messages and comments and well wishes, and he personally asked me to convey this to you so that nobody thinks he's just like a giant dick that's too good to answer, right? And I gotta say, there is a possibility that by the time you guys are hearing this issue will have been resolved. But at last check-in, like, things were not looking good. Like, he's working on it, but apparently he's like, nobody at Instagram is beeping his pager back.
Pagers are all the rage among startups.
Oh my God. So hopefully that gets fixed, but now you all know. There you go. Message conveyed. Hayden, what's going on with you, man? How you living this week? What have you been up to?
Hey, dude. Just been poking around the old elk woods there.
Mm-hmm.
Tis the season.
Yeah, I saw your elk meat hauling adventures on the gram, and that's great and all. But we need to get you away from that. I mean, here at Bent, we'll take a half day of trout and a trip to Pizza Wings, Steaks and Things over a 14-mile round-trip hike to help a buddy any day. But I'm kidding, of course, man. It's cool to see so many of my colleagues out in Montana putting arrows in elk. Very good stuff. I know what a challenge that is. Or, I mean, so I've read. I couldn't do it. But I hope you get yours, man. You feeling good? Are you going to get it done?
Well, first off, it actually ended up being closer to 25 miles.
Oh, there you go.
When all
to be young.
Dude, it was stupid brutal, man. As soon as we shot those two elk, man, we were like, yes! And then we were like, oh no.
Oh no.
That was stupid brutal. But, I think I'll get it done. It's a lot like muskie fishing.
Mm-hmm.
The only way to get it done is like sheer volume of effort,
Right.
Anyhow, we'll see what's up.
Right on. So how you feeling about your news story this week?
Oh, don't worry about me, bro. I got this.
Okay, good.
All right. Fish news. Remember, folks, this is a competition, and at the end, Phil, my wonderful, smart, kind, charismatic boss, will declare a winner. It's Joe's leadoff this week, so Joe?
Yeah, you had the honors in your inaugural run, but now it's my turn. So let's see. I've got a record fish story this week with a twist, but first I have to ask, have you any experience catching bonito or false albacore or little toonie, as they're better known from where we come from?
Toonie.
Yeah, little toonie.
Nah, I haven't personally. I've heard they're riot. Old Tommy R over at Orvis goes off about them on his podcast all the time. Man, he makes them seem fun, dude.
Big fan. Yep.
Yeah, but before I made the move out west, they were like super high on my agenda.
Right.
I happen to know you, however, do have a lot of experience.
Yeah, I love them. Matter of fact, Albie season is just about to kick off here. Also, matter of fact, this week's guest co-host, Jim Fee, is an Albie slayer, and he sees them even sooner up on Cape Cod than I do in Jersey, so he's already getting his fix. But where I live, these fish have this insane cult following. They only come inshore for a short time. They fight like hell, and of course, like they're super popular with the salty bro-bra fly crowd.
Strip. I just... Yeah, you're like, oh, this is sick. Bro-bra, what was that?
That clip? That's from a trailer to a documentary called All or Nothing, which I highly recommend everyone looks up on YouTube. And I'll just say, long before any of you ever heard the name Bob the Garbage Man, there was Shane Babcock, the world's greatest false albacore fly fisherman. Anyway, I digress. The point is that in the north, right, these fish are revered, but once you get south of North Carolina, they're pretty much considered junk, like including in the Gulf of Mexico. They're there year-round, and they just tend to get in the way of the stuff guys really want to catch, like tuna and kingfish, stuff like that. Well, late this summer, Alabama angler, I want to say it's probably pronounced Kyle, but there's an extra A in there, so it could also be Kale. Kayle. I'm going to just say Kyle. Kyle Davis signed himself up for the Alabama Deep Sea Fishing Rodeo, which, as I understand it, is a weekend-long event. Now, what Davis wanted to catch were blackfin tuna, and before I even got to the fish part, I was struck by a quote from Davis who said he was 74 miles off in a 21-foot boat. 21-foot boat. I mean, dude, that's some cowboy shit right there.
Boy, howdy it is, man. That's a brave dude.
Yeah. Now, I have no idea what he was running, but they had to be carrying extra fuel. And while that sounds like crazy to non-cowboy me, this is also why I love you Southern Gulf boys. I mean that. Like, if you need fresh tuna, you'll just strap a drum of diesel to a rubber raft and get after it. And I respect that. Anyway, so Davis, he found his tuna, but mixed in were bonita, which is very common. They go hand in hand. And I can tell you from experience, we all get crazy on the Instagram here when we land like a 5-pounder on fly in Montauk. That's nothing in the Gulf. They're huge. Oh, dude, they will break a 9-weight. And how huge, you might wonder. Well, Davis ended up sticking a bobo that weighed 22 pounds, 4 ounces. But that number is technically inaccurate, and I'll get to that, right? So a little twisty here.
Okay.
You with me? You still with me, Hayden?
Well, I mean, you're talking to a totally, neophyte in the bobo catching biz. But
we should change that.
You. I'm pretty
Aren't you due for a trip home, like in the next couple weeks? I'll make it happen. So anyway, Davis said they were keeping some of the bonita they were catching. And as soon as they'd hit the deck, they'd cut them in half because they'd end up right in the freezer back home to use on later trips for bait. Well, the bonita they were catching were so big they decided to keep one to weigh in at the rodeo. Now, I said that final weight was technically inaccurate because Davis and crew had stayed out fishing, I'm thinking probably overnight, so it didn't hit the rodeo scale until 36 hours after it was caught, which means it likely weighed more than 22 pounds, 4 ounces. But even after losing some water weight, it still qualified for an Alabama state record, beating the 21-pound record that had stood since 1956. So here's the fun part. It took the rodeo people a little time to figure out that this was a state record. And when they did, they immediately got in touch with Davis and said, hey, we're going to need that fish. And he was like, hey, I already cut it in half and threw it in the bait freezer, right? So luckily, he had enough photographic evidence that the fish will still qualify. But here's what I think is funny. While I'm sure Davis thinks it's cool to claim the record, he wasn't treating that fish any different than the thousands of other bonita he's probably whacked up over the years for bait. And I can almost guarantee between 1956 and 2021, many bonita bigger than 21 pounds have been caught, but none of the people that caught them down in the Gulf off Alabama gave enough of a shit about them to think or care about claiming a state record. You know what I mean?
Okay, so I kind of love and hate this for 2 reasons.
Yeah.
First off, I love that this dude is cutting up state record fish for bait.
It's actually happened before. There have been stories of people like eating world records and shit.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I mean, you hear about him, but somehow And I don't know why, it just makes me happy. I guess it's because like in this era of like line class record goofballs trying to turn like anything into a record to have their name in the book somewhere.
Yeah, I'm with
like
you.
This speaks to like a sort of like pure form of pursuit. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, well, yeah, I caught this thing, but I'm trying to catch this thing, so this thing is now bait, regardless of its, status.
Yeah.
That said, I kind of hate it because it's just like the trash fish thing,
Yeah.
False albies, not that I know a lot about them, are cool. Like they look cool, they fight hard, they burn drags, but everyone has collectively decided for some reason that they're just like,
Right.
Now, I kind of got a theory about that. I've found that with like some exceptions, like tarpon, for instance, a lot of fish are labeled trash fish because of like perceived edibility.
Sure.
Do they just like taste shitty or?
Well, yeah, and it's a fair question, and I think a lot of the lack of table fare opportunity with albies has created that vibe you're talking about. And I got to be real honest, I've never eaten one. I've hacked up a lot of them, and I can tell you, compared to like a skipjack tuna or some of the other lesser tunas, man, like that meat is so red it's almost black, and you can just sort of smell the oiliness, sort of mackerel scent that these fish have, which is why they're such great bait. That said, every once in a blue moon, you'll see a piece of media pop up where like somebody claims that we're all crazy and they make like the best sashimi ever.
Really?
And I haven't tried it. But, you'll see a video pop up or a catch and cook where somebody's like, if you bleed him and you do this, it's the best ever. But, man, I feel like if that were true, more people would have caught on to that. You know what I mean? Like, you just don't – it's just not working. And, like, skipjacks, they're kind of, like, subpar. But they're way better than a false albacore. If I catch skippies, I'll keep some if we're, but I don't know, man. I just think that's what it is. They just are such a strong flavored fish.
Yeah, I mean, that would be difficult for me. I'm a huge sushi guy, man. I'll eat sushi and sashimi until it comes out my eyeballs. But I am not a fan of like oily fish like mackerel, like totally turns me off.
Right. We're going to explore a lot more of that when the new season of B-Side drops with our first episode. Oily fish is kind of like the deal. But I would try it. I should just to say that I did it. Maybe this season I'll bleed one out and just see.
Dude, well, when I come down there and we go albie fishing, let's do it.
You can eat all you want.
All right. Speaking of eating all the fish you want.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Come on down. Tom's all you can eat fish buffet.
My story comes from the otter side of the pond in the UK. How do you like that?
I have to. I don't like it, but I can't not like it because I appreciate you trying to spin these. It's great, actually. I love it. Forget I just said that. It's terrific. You just keep being you.
So, a UK couple is what I can only describe as deeply, deeply disturbed over recent developments in their backyard pond. Eric and Linda McKenzie have recently discovered that something had invaded their pond and has just been absolutely destroying the prized fish that they stocked like some 15 years ago.
Oh, I can already guess what the prized fish are, but I will let you continue.
Basically, during their daily stroll around the fishing grounds, or whatever British folks call a walk around a pond, they kept finding carcasses of these prized fish. So I guess they had like a buddy with a trail cam or something, because they slapped one up and immediately found out what was killing their fish. Any guesses?
I'm going to say otter.
Oh, I made the otter pun.
Yeah, so you already forgot that you made the otter pun. So
it was indeed a big-ass otter, yeah. And they figured that the otter has murked like 10 fish worth an estimated 5,000 pounds, which is, I don't know the exact conversion rate, but that's a shit ton of American dollars.
I was going to say, I'll take your word for it because I don't know math or currency either. I know enough about British fishing culture to understand the way things work there, so I know where we're going, and I know that certain things that we wouldn't pay a shiny nickel for are worth that kind of money there. So continue on. Let's hear what they lost for 5,000 pounds.
Well, I'll get to that, but to continue the story, these folks are pissed. They're like really, really pissed. And you know how a lot of times like the madder folks get, the dumber they get?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Anger just like completely shuts down your brain function. Yes.
Yeah. Well, Mr. McKenzie said, and I quote, "We would like to see some restriction on their breeding before the fish stock in our rivers is depleted." Meaning,
hold on. So wait, he's talking about wild rivers, but the problem here happened in his private pond.
Yeah. It's obviously reductionist. This guy is clearly taking a personal problem existing in an artificial environment that he created,
right,
and applying his experience to the entirety of the UK, which, to be fair, is also mostly an artificial environment.
We have some listeners across the pond, man, that are like still trying to figure out if they like you or not. You got to be careful.
Whatever.
Although I'm going to make fun of them later in this show too. So sorry.
I'm a big fan of your chalk streams. Anyhow,
I just wish I was allowed to fish some and had the money to do so if I showed up there. Yeah.
Only bamboo. Anyhow, when I read that
chalk streams. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Anyhow, when I read that quote, my first thought was that there was like some organization that was like doing some vigilante reintroduction type stuff with these otters,
right.
You know, maybe breeding them and dumping these captive bred otters into the river. That's not the case. In the research I did, Eric specifically mentioned a UK conservation organization called the Otter Trust. So I checked out their website thinking that I was going to see something about a breeding program.
Right.
And there is absolutely no mention of a breeding program. And in further research, the only thing that I could really find was that there was a 10-year period from like the mid-'80s to the mid-'90s where about 200 individual otters were released at a time when there were very, very few otters. So it's not like we're dumping thousands of otters into like UK waters.
Yeah.
So, again, all that's to say that there's no vigilante otter reintroduction going on.
Like a vigilante! He's like a vigilante cat. It's a cat who's a vigilante. It's a cat who is a vigilante.
I got that, Gord, okay?
And that means, or at least it sounds like, the Mackenzies are somehow suggesting that we limit the otter's ability to breed in the wild.
Yeah, man. So yeah, it's just a case of two people like going, all that wild stuff that's happening out there, we need to do something about that immediately.
Yeah, because I like the stuff that I got going on in my pond. Now, I have no idea how they'd go about limiting, like, you know, the otters breeding in the wild. But if they do start some sort of anti-otter, anti-breeding coalition, I'd like to formally suggest the slogan, "No more f***ing otters."
We'll make shirts of that right along with my Dolphins t-shirt. It's sort of the same thing. You know what I mean? Like we've been having a lot of fun with the Dolphins, but same deal, man. I mean, unfortunately, this happens too often where, you know, you see this with like, it's kind of like where I live and where you're from. Like people like think the deer are pets and things, and anything we can do to protect the deer from this or that, you know, we're shutting down bear hunts to protect this and protect that. It's like you just can't meddle that far with the wild, man. Like, so, and I like
no.
Who even has the time to suggest all these things or write to whoever they have to write to, expecting people to what? Jump up and start what? Trapping otters, or even caring or looking? Again, similar to snakeheads, they're everywhere now, and like every once in a while, one will pop up in a new place and people like call DEP like, "Get down here right now!" And it's like, dude, they're not the Ghostbusters, you know what I mean? They're not just gonna swoop in and like set up the trap like for Slimer, you know? So it's just lunacy. Like you said, people get dumb when they're mad.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you got to give the British folks points for consistency because this is like the most hilariously colonialist solution to a native species living the way it has forever.
Yes.
You know?
Yes, for millennia. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I have one more quote that's just kind of unbelievable. So for folks who supposedly love nature, as is mentioned many times in the articles I've found about this prized fish massacre, I can't imagine two folks being more out of touch with reality. Eric McKenzie says, and I quote, "We enjoy our walks around the surrounding countryside and seeing the local wildlife, but feel strongly that more should be done to control these animals and take responsibility for their actions." Like, Joe, what does that even mean? I really want to know, like, what kind of weird British solution Eric is envisioning here. Are we going to appoint an otter lord?
If that paid well, I'd go over there and be the otter lord. You know what I mean? Try something different for a little while.
I don't think it'd pay very good.
It might get you on the chalk streams, though. You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe that's a perk of the job, you know?
It could. Now, I'm sure you've noticed I've been referring to the otter victims as prized fish. Joe, ask me what kind of fish these are.
I'm just going to guess. I'm going to say they're carp because I know there are about some carp over there.
They are grass carp.
Grass carp. That's interesting to me. I see now, again, I'm not super fluent in the entirety of the carp scene there, but mostly what you see and what I know guys will spend big bucks on are the mirrors and the commons and the ones with the long fan tails. I didn't even know grass carp was a thing over there. I'm wondering if they're native or invasive. Do you know?
Oh, they are invasive for sure.
Really?
Kind of the interesting thing about it is there is, I believe, a small, population that can breed in the wild because of water temperatures. But for the most part, when you find grass carp in the UK, they're effectively sterile because the water temperature never gets to the point that they're able to spawn.
Gotcha.
They're not even native in the UK, which I think kind of falls in line a little bit with the char story we discussed last week.
Sure.
With native species, although obviously these aren't fish, they're otters, being extirpated in favor of imported and exotic species. Somehow, people equate a better fishing opportunity to a better environment, and I just don't think that that's true.
No, you're right, man. Like imported grass carp should not win out over cute, playful otters. I agree. Very similar to the char deal. Phil, what do you feel like today? What kind of sashimi? Grass carp or false albacore? I'm not sure. I would actually probably venture to guess that the grass carp might end up being better. But that was a fun one. We're going to hear from Phil. He's going to judge us. Okay, he's going to lay down the law. And then as soon as we're done, we're actually going to do our first ever official Nibbles and Sips segment because I've asked for voice recordings from you guys. And boy, are you delivering.
Sorry, Hayden, but I've got to give it to the Otter podcast host until you stop making these shitty puns. Joe Cermelli, you're the winner. Listen. All three of us can play music, and I'll be damned if our band name isn't going to be Vigilante Otter Reintroduction. Catch us on the Bent Spotify playlist, and probably nowhere else.
I just called to say
it is a new era of loneliness. Oh, God.
So, Jim, I recently put out the call for our listeners to send me voice memos for a fresh segment I'm calling Nibbles and Sips. And our audio engineer, Phil, he doesn't care for the name, but that's too bad. But I told people you could send a comment, question, rant, rave. These things could be done drunk or sober. Anything goes, and I've been getting some response.
Yeah, Nibbles and Sips reminds me of what another one of our mutual friends, Crazy Alberto Nee, used to say when he would describe how the trout were feeding, and he would call them kisses and slaps.
That just reminds me that I got to get Alberto Nee on the show. Kisses and slaps. It could have gone either way, but I'm sticking with Nibbles and Sips. So anyway, last week, my inaugural Nibble and Sip was a fan telling me I mispronounced some hockey shit. So this week we have actually a very fun question from listener Noah Dodson. Here it is.
Hey guys, so my question is, I do a lot of fishing with my dad. We go to a local lake for a lot of largemouth and smallmouth bass. Well, my dad's about 71 years old, and the only bait he will use is soft plastic worms, most time in colors that the companies don't even make anymore. He uses these along with copious amounts of what he calls monkey pee. What can I do to convince him to diversify his bait pile?
There is so much to say about this. Where do we start?
Yeah, so I've never heard of that particular fish attractant, monkey pee.
Monkey pee? You're referring to the monkey pee?
Yeah.
Yes. So I was taken aback by the monkey pee. I never heard of it either. Now we were both accurate in assuming that it is in fact a scent attractant. But I was thinking it's got to be homemade, like some backwoods homebrew or something. But I followed up because I had to know. According to Noah, monkey pee smells like garlic, and his pops puts it on every bait. And it is not homemade. He bought it many, many years ago, which makes me wonder, did he buy it by the case, or does he just not fish that often? Because how long can a bottle or two from the 80s or whenever last if he literally puts it on every bait?
No, now that you describe it like that, it reminds me of the old, there used to be aerosol cans of fish spray. Do you remember those? And they would smell like garlic.
Oh, God, they would always blow up eventually. Like if you left them in a, oh my God, you're right. I don't remember what they were called.
Bang.
Is that what they were called? Bang?
I think it was Bang, yep.
There were all kinds of things like that. There were the aerosol cans, and they would always ooze if you left them in your tackle box. Yeah. And then only the hardcore salty guys are going to remember this, but do you remember the freaking bait bombs? It was like a grenade, an aerosol grenade that you would shake and like pull the pin and drop down on a line to depth, and it would just blow up in the middle of the water column and create like a huge cloud of bunker or mackerel oil.
I must have missed that one. That does not ring a bell. That's crazy.
Oh, God, dude. You wouldn't have missed it if you were there when one blew up in the cuddy cabin of my old Pursuit just because it was overheated. I forget. It gets rather hot down there in the summertime, and like I didn't even remember it was in there. And it was a bad deal. Anyway, I would love to know the specifics of Noah's dad's arsenal. Because once again, if you can really lean on discontinued baits and colors, these worms, he says he's using mostly discontinued stuff. If you can do that for years and years, you got to have one hell of a stash. Dude, I don't know, it could also be worth a lot of money. Like he might have the only original power worms in crystal clear Pepsi color left on the planet.
Oh, that's a collectible item right there. I love Crystal Pepsi.
Did you love the real Crystal Pepsi? I thought it was gross.
They brought it back a couple years ago, and I went on a mission to find it. I finally found it at a Walmart 2 towns over. I absolutely did.
Did you really?
I did. It tasted terrible. It was horrible.
Well, that and that and Pepsi Kona. Did you go looking for that? Were you
Pepsi Kona was awful. That was really bad.
Yeah.
I remember Pepsi Kona.
Crystal clear for the win. But I think to get to the root of the question, though, Noah, let me tell you a story about my dad, who is about the same age as your dad. Like, I'll take him smallmouth fishing, and I'll be catching fish on, we'll just say, a new age jerkbait. And I'll give the man the same jerkbait, but he doesn't feel like jerking it as hard as I am. He just wants to sit and relax. And I used to get frustrated, and now I say, you know what, man? Like, here's an inline spinner, just cast and reel, and on days when his gooch level isn't turned up to full blast, he does just fine that way. And he's happy. Like, he doesn't need to be the next KVD.
Yeah, my dad always accuses me of giving a lure that I know isn't going to work. Like, he says that this
really?
is a lure. Oh, yeah. He thinks I'm giving him one that I'm not worried about losing. So,
Are you?
Sometimes.
No, dude, you got a whole arsenal of like nicely turned wood and special striper stuff, and when you give him like the beat up bucktail.
Yeah, he's getting the old bomber, not the $30 needlefish. But no, I know plenty of people like that where I'm one of the people like that. Take the Cape Cod Canal, for example, which is just up the road from me. You have these newer paddle tail swim baits that everybody uses. I would much rather throw a bucktail, and I will watch all the people around me catch the fish on the paddle tail swim baits, and I will, at a certain point after like 3 fish, it's too late to change. After watching people catch 3 fish, you can't change now. You've got to prove a point. You got to be like, well, this is just as good. If I changed after the first one, it's okay. But after 3, I'm like, oh, now I'm riding this one.
Yeah, man. Like at that point, you've just got to stick to your guns. Like I totally get what you're saying. But I think another point here is like, why you got to change the man's program at 72 years old? Like if he wants to fish the old stuff, like Noah, just let him do it. Like he doesn't need to diversify his bait pile, which I found to be a weird term. It's like financial or something, isn't it? Like diversify your bait pile. And I mean, if he's catching fish, right? Even more reason to just leave the man alone. Like I've found over the years that if someone is receptive to learning what I have to teach, like they're excited about it, I really enjoy that. I would rather see them catch the fish than me catch the fish. But if they're not, I just stop being concerned about that person and focus back up on me catching fish. Like you lost your chance. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm perfectly content using the lure that's catching. I don't need you to use it too. So
right. Exactly. It's my lure. Anyway, Noah, that was a really fun question, man. I do appreciate it. I guess if you still insist on modernizing your old man, you could throw all his shit out and replace it with spy baits and topwater bats or something. I'm sure he'd love a good topwater bat lure, perhaps a topwater snake. By the way, Noah just got himself some swag for that. And you can too if you record a voice memo and it ends up being played on this show. Surprise me, and you can send those to bent@themeateater.com or you can send them via DM to my Instagram account. Either way, tell me something. So we are just about out of time here, but I've actually got a fitting end of the line segment this week. It sort of ties back to Noah's question. Because it's a great example of a lure that it's got many alternatives, but the OG striper guys want the OG version. So Jim, you're a striper guy of the highest caliber, but without giving away the name of the lure, if I said sand eel teaser invented in England, would you know what I was talking about?
I would know exactly what you're talking about. It's going to be a pretty heavy duty, resistant to bluefish teeth, perfect imitation of a sand eel, nice kicking tail. It is definitely this one, unless it's the other one.
Well, let's find out.
Fishy, 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 fishy!
Well, that's not loud enough, Bert.
Here's a short list of destinations that salty anglers dream of visiting. Vanuatu in the South Pacific, the Great Barrier Reef, the Seychelles, Hawaii, Cabo San Lucas, Belize, the Florida Keys. Now, in case you missed it, what did not make that list was England. I mean, they saltwater fish over there, right? But when I think of coastal fishing in England, I kind of think, man, it would suck to be a salty guy in England. They chase like conger eels and dogfish, pollock or haddock or something. I mean, basically, their A-list species are all the shit we shake off the line over here in the Northeast. Now, that said, one might assume that there couldn't possibly be some Brit-made lure that's better or more original than what us salty Americans came up with. But that's wrong. Red Gill Lures. Ever heard of the company? If you don't chase striped bass on the beaches of the Northeast, strong chance you haven't. But Red Gill is to England what companies like Arbogast and Smithwick were to the U.S. Red Gill started in 1950 in the Cornish fishing village of Mevagissey in southwest England. Now, the original Red Gill lure was designed by Alex Ingram, and it was actually way ahead of its time. The Red Gill mimics a sand eel, which is a common baitfish species found in the North and Middle Atlantic. Pretty much every inshore species that lives where sand eels lives eats them. Starting from the back, the Red Gill actually has a paddle tail, which wouldn't become common on other lures for many, many years. That paddle tapers into the rest of the tail, which is ribbon thin until it meets the belly of the lure. The body widens out and finishes at a tapered, very anatomically correct sand eel head. But here's what else made the lure so unique. It's not really a soft plastic. Red gills are more rigid, made from what feels more like vinyl, yet despite that rigidity, the taper still allows that thin paddle tail to kick and flutter. Red gills also have a hollow channel that runs from the nose to the belly. In a way, it's designed kind of like a tube fly. You wouldn't put a red gill on a jig head. Instead, you'd thread your line through the bait. Tie the hook to the tag end, then draw the line back through the nose until that hook seats perfectly in the red gill's belly. Now, we got sand eels over here too, and during the fall, their inshore migration often collides with the fall striper migration. To mimic this forage, there are plenty of sand eel imitations on the market, but back in the day, the only option old-timey surfcasters really had were slim metal lures and plugs. But sand eels can be very small, and to steal a phrase from the fly crowd, matching the hatch precisely can be really important. But delivering something the true size of a small sand eel 50 feet out past the waves, that's pretty challenging. At some point in history, likely in the 50s or 60s, smart surfcasters realized that a red gill could be rigged ahead of their metal lures and plugs as a teaser via a dropper loop on their leader. The primary lure now provided the oomph for a proper distance cast, but the red gill matched that hatch. And because red gills weigh pretty much nothing, they also didn't affect the action of the main lure, essentially allowing anglers to present a buffet of forage size options in a single retrieve. That rigid construction also made red gills extremely durable and able to withstand season after season of abuse. Thanks to the internet, red gills are a bit easier to get a hold of today, but for many years they were not. Select shops on the Striper Coast carried them, but they were a bit of a secret weapon, kind of a hot commodity. I ended up with a handful in the early 2000s because the magazine I was working for was running a piece about vintage striper lures and had them shipped straight across the pond to us. And I still have most of them. They're tattered and scraped up. But in my opinion, red gills are still the best sand eel teaser you can use. Now, there are plenty of US-made knockoffs and other options, but none I trust more than the original red gill. And believe me, there are days when your teaser is more important and catches a lot more fish than your primary lure. Also, I love you, England, and I was just kidding earlier. One of these days, I'll pop over for a pint and to catch some of your conger eels and dogfish. So that's it for this week. Remember, if your dad wants to dribble monkey piss all over his helicopter lures, just let him. The British invasion of striper lures only included one bait and therefore was a very small invasion. Springsteen probably hogs the back corner of the party boat, and Jim Fee will just outfish him from the front.
I don't know about that. I might outsing him.
I'd love to see it either way. Outsing him or outfish him. Huge thanks to you, Jim, for co-hosting this week. You can find him on the gram. You should. He's at James T. Fee. And go watch On the Waters at the Rail if you love the party boat scene. Also, if you want to hire Bruce Springsteen or Ray Liotta to do your fishing reports, you need to check out at Paradenoia on Instagram. Keep all those sailbin items, awkward moments, voice memos, all the stuff I usually ask for, just coming to bent@themeateater.com. Keep using those Degenerate Angler and Bent podcast hashtags. And finally, don't forget that the easiest way to cure FOMO is to just never look at social media or listen to fishing podcasts.